Hello, friends. Welcome to a new YouTube channel that I, your host, Rash, of Rash Decision, will be talking about various aspects of various games as I see fit. Today, I'm talking about Farming Simulator 22's brand new Premium Edition. We're about to log into Zelanka and have a look around. Let's talk about it. All right, and here we are in beautiful Zelanka. Looks like we have some rolling hills off in the distance here. I do often enjoy rolling hills and elevation changes in general. Um, I am from the east coast of the U.S., so that does really sing to my blood, if you really want to put it that way. But more or less, I'm just a fan of anything that's interesting. I've never been a big fan of super flat maps like in Texas or the Midwest. Nothing wrong with those states. They are the breadbasket of the world, don't get me wrong. I just am very partial to a little bit of elevation change, so I'm seeing that already. That's a very promising situation. So if we start by looking around at some of the new equipment, let's actually go over here. Looks like we have a standard weeder. That is a new weeder. That's not part of the base game, so it looks like it's probably part of the new expansion. We'll get into vehicles and tools in the shop in just a moment, but it looks like we have a base game trailer here, standard wagon trailer. I believe this one is either 12 or 18 liters. I'm not exactly certain. We could check on that later. Over here, we have the new equipment. This is for vegetables, so this is the new seeder planter. I'm not quite sure which one it's going to be classified as. But I do know there is its own category in the shop, so we won't get those confused. This is the same situation. This is the harvester for the new crops, carrots, parsnips, and beets. So we'll use that to harvest them once they're ready to go. I did find out you do not need a home chopper. So we actually can just go directly into this. We don't need to do anything with the topping. If you plant the crops, they will say they need to have the tops removed. That is not the case. You can just run this right over it and it'll just keep going. Same situation over here. This is a new disc harrow, it looks like. Yeah, it looks like a disc harrow. So we're going to keep going. This is actually an interesting building. I wasn't quite sure what to make of this, but when I got to looking at it myself, it looks pretty nice actually. It has a very Eastern European feel. It's very utilitarian, but we've got a chicken coop in one side and a standard shed in the other. Yeah. Now this is mostly for decoration. I don't think you're going to fit many tools inside these doors. Unless there's maybe a loading door. No, there's no loading door over here. So you're probably not going to be using that for anything besides decoration, really. That's perfectly fine, though. I've seen plenty of RP servers that use nothing but decoration, and they work just fine. So over here we have, this is actually a base game trailer as well. I use this one quite a bit myself. This one can be extended up the top, and it actually has a really nice capacity for its price. And then, of course, this is one of the brand new tractors. You may have seen this tractor around before, and you would be right. This tractor has been used in many mods, has been converted from earlier versions of the game. Now, anything before 2017, I'm not knowledgeable on. I do not know if this comes from before that, but I will tell you, I have played with the mod for this tractor many times. I will say that this tractor does really well with mods. It converts extremely well due to its relatively simplistic nature. And what I mean by that is the hood is flat. This is all flat polygon. There's no exposed internals that need to be modeled out. It just works great for modders because they can just put a hood on it, call it a day. This also works great for situations where you have a less powerful computer or possibly you're playing on a console. This will help because the lower polygon count will make it run a little bit smoother. I'm not going to say you're going to see an immense situation uh, unless you have like a fleet of these and everyone's driving one on your multiplayer farm. Uh, but it does help if you really need to get your polygon count down. You're running on an older card or maybe one of the older generation consoles, that sort of thing. So we'll just go ahead and move on beyond that. Have our standard silo. That is base game silo. Same thing you get on Elm Creek. And of course, over here we have our standard Dudesvar topliner. Same thing you get on Elm Creek. Nothing special here. This expansion did not add any new grain harvesters or header trailers. So it is what it is. It comes with the package. And of course, here we have the 1984 pickup for the Eastern European region. This is actually a very interesting pickup. I've seen these before. This right here would be your engine compartment. The cab does overextend over the front axle, and the rear axle has a little bit of extension, but importantly, the engine is going to be here. It's going to be center driven, usually like by a flat Volkswagen engine of some kind. So these are relatively low powered, and that's no different here. This thing is only 90 horsepower, so trying to put a trailer on that hitch, you need to be really careful going up and down some of these hills that are rolling around. You can bog this engine down very easily. That said, I will say that I do like the addition of the very flat bed that we have here. We get in. Interesting startup sound. Definitely gives a low maintenance kind of vibe to it. But we're going to go ahead and drop this. And if you look here, get stuck on it. If you look here, that is very, very flat. That is excellent for moving pallets. And the reason that I bring that up is that they've actually added, we're going to go ahead and go to the shop. And we're going to segue directly into what we've added to the shop here. If we scroll all the way to the end, we skip over all this, we notice that we have a brand new vegetable pallet. So we can fill this up with vegetables, and we can actually use one of the new forklift attachments, or possibly even, oh, my mouse double clicked, I'm sorry. We can use this 3-point attachment to pick that up and put it in here, and it will sit very nicely in here. We could probably put multiple, maybe even 4. I'm not exactly certain. I haven't played with it enough. But let's go ahead and we'll talk about what's in the shop. Actually, before we get to the shop, a little bit of time has passed because I have been working in the background a little bit, working on this video. We're actually going to go over here on the map, and we're actually going to look at this last tractor that the starting farm block comes with. And that's actually going to be this one. And that is the Zetor. I'm actually not quite sure if that's pronounced Zetor or Zetor. Zetor. I'm not quite sure. This one is a little bit foreign to me. There are a lot of these tractor manufacturers that I'm not exactly certain how to pronounce, but we're going to say Zetor for now. The Zetor Crystal. This is actually one that has been seen in a mod before, but not at this level of detail. I wouldn't dare ask a modder to go in and take their time to mod all of this out. Look at this. We've got that looks like a hydraulic pump. That looks like the fuel plate and pump. We've got full turbo mounting. Got the full intake manifold. Everything here, the fuel filters, looks like hydraulic filters possibly, alternator, everything here has been fully modeled out. It all looks absolutely superb. If you walked up to this tractor in the real world, you would very much see exactly what we're seeing here. But this is also what I was talking about on the Fiat, that when you have this many polygons and it's this high of quality, when you have lots of these running around every field, it can bog down a server. It can bog down your client quite a bit. So these, only use a lot of them if you feel like your computer or console can handle it. That being said, I don't think you'll ever see a real issue. But the more entities you have, with the more polygons you have on screen, your computer might start having a little bit of an issue if there's like 12 of these on screen at the same time. That being said, this is actually a very nice tractor, all things considered. We'll get into a little bit more detail here in just a moment, but I do like the way this tractor looks, and it's very long. It has like a very, I guess, burly stance. Is that a really good word to use for a tractor? Can we use athletic and burly in the frame of mind of tractors? I'm sure we can. So we're actually going to go ahead and do that. But also this, unfortunately, does seem like it might be a base game seeder. I don't remember if this one was added or not. We'll look into that a little bit more in just a moment. I don't think this one's a new one. I believe this one's a base game. A little bit disappointing. I kind of wish they had done a little bit more to improve what the base game offered. But for what is available in the premium edition and what they're trying to add, I have no real complaints. We'll get into that in just a moment. And here we are back in the shop. We're going to have a look at each of the items that have been added in a little bit closer lens. So starting back with the pickup, this one is just like we talked about over on the starting farm. Has a lot of really nice cargo space back here, but that's really its only selling point. The low horsepower makes this hitch kind of difficult to use, but you could use it for removing small things such as tractors or skid steers, small implements like that, single items, that wouldn't be too bad for something like this. I just wouldn't recommend trying to take it off road. It doesn't really have a lot of ground clearance, that sort of thing, and that nose might get stuck on a hill or two here or there. But keep this on the road, keep its load on the hitch really low, and put pallets in the back of it. You'll see some great use for it. Going back out, if we look at the next one, this one is the Salic Wynea. I'm actually not sure if this is supposed to be pronounced Wynea or Winnea. I think it would make a lot more sense if it's Wynea, so I speak it that way. And that's actually because this is very clearly a orchard tractor. Has a nice thin profile. It looks like it does articulate here in the center, so that means it's going to have articulated driving. Makes it a little bit more difficult to steer, especially in first person if you're not used to it. But it's no different than some of the previous DLC tractors for vineyards and orchards. So we're just going to go ahead and pass by that. It's not really amazing. Only has 18 miles per hour, has 59 horsepower. Not going to be able to do a whole lot for you, but it is an interesting addition. It gives it a very Eastern European feel if you do decide to create your own orchard or vineyard, so you can keep that theme going strong. This is the Zetor Crystal again. Very interesting, and the reason I wanted to bring this one up very specifically, if you notice, it's only 5 tons. Now, very interestingly, if we go out and we have a look at this thing in the primary shop, it's actually classified as a medium tractor. To me, that really means that it's kind of a small tractor masquerading as a medium tractor. It's more its size that really kind of classified as a medium. It's 150 horsepower, it's 58.5, and it's 5 tons and 15 miles per hour. Wait a minute, we've seen this before, haven't we? Yes, we have. For the eagle-eyed among you who may have actually loaded this mod, it's an official mod from Giants. I'm scrolling through. Here it is. And yes, it is the Fiat 1300 DT from Farming Simulator 19. Yes, look at that. 150 horsepower, 15 miles per hour, 5.4 tons. Now, I will say that this League of Tractor really just comes down to only if you really just need something to get you started. That being said, it is a good tractor for getting started, but because of its low weight, it kind of makes it a little bit harder to use. That being said, we can go ahead and increase the weight here. This front weight is by far the standout feature over the Fiat. The 1300 DT does not have a front weight, which limits its use significantly, but here we have a front weight, and it actually increases the weight of this vehicle very significantly. And it does make this extremely useful for plowing, for moving cultivators, ground implementing equipment. So we'll go ahead and we'll just chalk that up to get started. I wouldn't recommend staying with this one for overly long unless you really just want to keep with the theme. The older tractor style is very intoxicating, I will admit. I am a huge fan of old style tractors like this. I'm not too big of a fan of the newer style, but there's more of them in the game and there's much better options available for you. Moving on to the new Fiat. This is the 16090. Has 160 horsepower, just like the model number, and we can move it up to 180 with a quick little $10,000 purchase. This does leave it right in line with what I would expect from this level of tractor. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this tractor at all, anywhere. In fact, it can have a front loader. It can do a few different things. You'll see this option here, but that's because I have precision farming installed. You won't see this if you do not, but it does work the same. If you have this enabled, it will in fact cause the helpers you hire with this tractor to be a little bit more efficient. That's wonderful. Now, if we move on a little bit, have some new mowers. I wasn't quite expecting mowers with this, but here we are. This is the type of mower that you do see the conveyor belts here. If you mow with this, it will leave one row of grass, silage, whatever you're mowing with it, down the center. And of course, we do have a windrower that matches and is a nice wide windrower. I can't even speak today. Look at that. And this is actually the weeder that's on the base farm that we were talking about. So this is actually a very low power usage weeder. It's only 4.5 meters wide, so that has a bit of use. You could run this even behind some of the very low power DLC tractors that we see. This is a wider variant. It's at 6 meters, but still only 60 horsepower. It's also very light. Excellent, excellent. This is the new wagon trailer for the DLC. I almost said mod there. Giants does mods, but this is a DLC, an expansion. So this one is quite a bit larger than the base. In fact, we never did go to see how large that one that's on the farm is. And, oh, it's actually less than I thought it was. I thought it was 12 or 18, but it looks like it's only an 8. A little bit smaller than I thought it was. But we'll go ahead, we'll move beyond that. Moving down the line, we have a new manure spreader. Very standard. Looks like it fits right in line with what's available in the base game. There is our disc harrow. We actually have this, which kind of surprised me. This is a brand new seeder for Premium Edition that doesn't deal with root crops. This deals with your cereals and legumes. And it's actually very useful. It's only 3 meters wide, but it holds quite a few seeds and has a relatively low power requirement for how well it works. In fact, you do not need cultivation or plowing. Moving on, we do have a much, much larger disc harrow and a new cultivator. This one's actually very special, and I can actually point out to you why that is, but we'll need to go back out and we'll need to go to the cultivators category. There it is. So if we scroll all the way to the end and we go to this one, this is the new one, 12 meters wide. Notice this is a full depth cultivator. The next largest full depth cultivator, at least that I have, is this one at 8 meters. More than that, you start getting into these shallow cultivators. The difference between, while it saves, the difference between our shallow cultivation and our deep cultivation, if we will notice, using a cultivator, shallow, most effective against weeds, but dig up large stones. Shallow cultivators have a wider working width and cover more ground, dig up stones that are smaller, not as effective against weeds. So if your interest is in getting rid of weeds, a deep cultivator is the better option. Now, that being said, the stones are still a bit of an issue. Stone pickers are not that big of a deal, but if you play without stones, a deep cultivator is a must because the stones will not be an issue. If you play with stones, it might be better to go with a shallow, but the fact that this is a 12 meter wide deep cultivator, that's a big deal. That's something I haven't seen before. That's very exciting. So we're going to go back to our list here. We're going to go down through. This is another new seeder for cereals and legumes, and this one is another one that's very exciting. This one is 6 meters wide, has a very low power rating compared to what you would expect, but it also doesn't require cultivating or plowing, and it fertilizes all at once. This is an all-in-one machine where you would need very little equipment to support it. Maybe plow every once in a while, maybe get your weeds out, get get the fertilization going for stage 2 or beyond if you need to, maybe some lime, but really you need very little equipment to go with this. And being 6 meters wide and 9 miles per hour, that's going to move pretty quickly across your field. That being said, because of how long it is and being it's a trailer, I would recommend having lots of space around your field to maneuver. These next few are kind of surprising as well. I wasn't expecting these. This is a power harrow. If you notice, you have the power tines, have the roller across the back. This is actually a very compact power harrow, in fact, and it's 8 meters wide. That power rating is a bit high, but it is expected for being a power harrow. That being said, as compact as this is extremely useful for when you need lots of area coverage, but don't have a lot of space to maneuver. Moving into the other Bednar options, this is just a tank by itself, but what is that going to do for you? Well, I'll tell you. It has a 3-point on the back. That means that one of these other tools that comes with it, you can also attach to it, or possibly even another brands if really need be. This is also useful for the vegetable vegetable seeder that we were speaking about before. You could also place the vegetable seeders on the back of this and just have an all-in-one tank and vegetable seeder combo. The other options here, this one is a subsoiler, bit of a larger subsoiler. Not too sure how this would be useful, especially only being 3 meters wide and 250 horsepower requirement. Now there is the fertilizer unit that you can attach to it, so this is a situation where you would attach this with its fertilizer unit to the back of this, and you would have a really nice subsoiler fertilizer all in one. So that means you're going to be plowing, which is going to get rid of all of your weeds. You're also going to be fertilizing, which takes care of both of those in one step. The other option is we come over here and we have a cereal and legumes seeder here as well. So we could take this and we could attach that right to the back of our CS500. I'm sorry, 5000. I'm missing a zero there. And that will be a one-stop shop for having quite a lot of work being done just with a few tools. Now, because it is modular, again, you can attach other tools to it, although I will admit I have not tested it enough to be able to tell you if other tools have any kind of bugs or issues with them. So you'll have to experiment with that on your own. Moving on, we have new sprayers, as well as a new self-propelled sprayer. Now, the one that is most interesting to me, obviously this one is very interesting. It's 36 meters wide, which is extremely wide for a pulled sprayer. It is 8,000 liters. That is a lot of capacity compared to what you see in the base game. And this one even more so, 13 and a half. This is a absolutely monstrous unit. Now, I do want to get into one quick little talk here for just a moment. I constantly see on the subreddit and on forums, discords, what have you, questions about power requirements. So before we go a little bit further, I do want to talk about that for just a moment. Power requirements, such as this 250, that's the requirement to use the implement. That doesn't take into consideration the weight of the implement, the weight of the tractor, or anything of that nature. The speed that you're going to be going, anything of that nature. If you're going uphill with this piece of equipment and you engage it and your tractor is only 250 horsepower, going uphill, this thing isn't going to move. And I know that because it is very heavy. It it means that the tractor you're putting it on is also going to be very heavy, and you're going to just overload that engine. That being said, you can put this on maybe like a 300 horsepower, and if on flat land, you would be able to achieve that 7 miles per hour. Going uphill, you probably still won't. Slopes are very difficult to climb, especially for very heavy equipment. The torque value of a transmission can only overcome so much friction when it's moving forward. So you really have to be careful about what tractor you're using, how you're using it. The type of transmission you use shouldn't really matter to the average player, but if you want to get into it, you can. That said, my simple rule of thumb is always give yourself a 50% overhead, especially if you're on slopes. If you're on flat land, You can go down to as far as a 25% overhead, 1/4 of this as overhead, and you should be fine. Now, that being what it is, 250. If we take 20% of that, that's 50 horsepower. 300 horsepower is fine for this. You can go a little bit lower than 25%, but I would honestly use that as a rule of thumb. At least 25% overhead over the requirement, and that should help. Now, what about things like this, where there is no requirement, but there's a lot of capacity? When there's a lot of capacity like this, you must remember that liquid is far more dense than solids. That being the case, you will need a lot of power to move this. This is already 5.5 tons empty. Now, if you remember the Zedor Crystal, that tractor is 5 tons by itself. If I put that Zedor Crystal on top of, in front of this, on top of it, yeah, sure, but in front of this, it's not going to move it very well at full capacity. If I've got 8,000 liters of either of these in here, that's going to be extremely heavy. I wouldn't put anything less than a 250 horsepower tractor in front of this, and even then I'd be questioning it. Even more so for this. This is called the Gigant. You better listen to that. This thing is a giant. This thing is massive. I wouldn't put anything less than 300 horsepower large tractor in front of this. This self-propelled. I didn't get a chance to look at this one too closely because I was looking at the other two a little bit more closely, but this is actually a very nice one. There isn't a lot to say about self-propelled sprayers except for the width that they work and the speed that they operate. This one operates at 15 miles an hour, which is significantly faster than the pulled, if you've ever noticed. So there is actually some use there. It is 36 meters, which is very nice. But then you think that if you're buying a tractor specifically to pull something like this, for example, that's going to be at least 200,000. So you're already over, and if you just need a sprayer, even if it's just for leasing it for like 1 day use, this is a really nice one to rely on, especially being that it is a Eastern European make and it does fit with the theme of the map. Now we're getting into the new equipment for the new crops. This is just your standard, excuse me, this is actually your standard ridge maker. So this is actually a power harrow that kind of breaks up the dirt and it just forms it into ridges. And now, of course, you do need a little bit of suspension of belief. And that just has to do with the fact that the ground is still flat underneath these ridges when it comes out. You can very clearly see it, but it does create that very nice three-dimensional texture that makes it look like it's ridges at very least. So it does have a very nice look to it. You just have to suspend your belief because this doesn't actually affect the voxel model of the ground. But I have used these. I've used this one as well as its larger brother, this one. Both of them are very nice, but I will say that this one has a nice little feature in this 3-point on the back, and that is actually because you would want to attach this right on the back of it. So if you were to take the Bendar tank, you could put the ridge maker on back of the tank, and then put the seeder directly on the back of that, and have just an all-in-one. And I will say that the ridge maker does make the field looks very nice. It makes it look exactly like you would expect a carrot or a parsnip field to look. Has the nice ridges, has the greenery just right on top of the ridge, going all the way down in perfect rows. This does really help as well. It adds a fertilization layer. So if you have precision farming, that's not going to mean too much to you because you'll still have to do your soil sample and make sure that everything's okay. But if you're playing without precision farming, you can use this, fertilize once, congratulations, you're done. And that's really a really nice thing to see. So this is just the larger seeder. The only bad news about this is that you can't actually attach this seeder to the back of this. There's no option for the 3-point, but that's honestly a good thing because having a 270 horsepower requirement on top of its weight and then a 70 horsepower requirement on top of its weight, that combination would require such an immense tractor to even do. Plus, you need to have the tank separate. I, I'm kind of glad there's no option to do that because it would be very tempting, and you'd probably get into a lot of trouble financially trying to power that. Getting into the harvesters are very straightforward. There's this one, just one row, has just a standard gets the crop out of the ground, puts the crop where you can get to it. That there's nothing really else to this. The bad news there is that you can't actually put this into a bin because the belt is not long enough, but it at least gets it out of the ground for you so you can do something else with it later. This one will actually put it up into a bin for you. It is the exact same model of harvester, it just has the extendable belt that will extend up and get into a bin. This is actually also articulating by player control, which means you can, in fact, move it up and down to get into taller or shorter bins as need be. That's really nice of them because I actually had a little bit of trouble myself with a semi trailer with this particular model because it wasn't able to get to the top of the trailer. But with just a little bit of modification, the helper kept the belt exactly where it was, and I was able to keep going. This one has its own hopper bin inside of the unit. The bad news about this one is that the hopper bin, in order to empty, the tractor pulling this has to stop. So even though it does lift up and it kind of tilts over just like a sugarcane holder, this one, because you have to stop to let it empty, the 5 meter capacity just really doesn't do much for you. It fills up. You have to stop, let it dump over into whatever bin you've got going on, rinse, repeat. And because you're that stop and start, harvesting is going to take an absolute lifetime. I don't like this machine. If that's the playstyle you want to go for RP, that's wonderful. But thinking about it as throughput of crops, I'm not personally a fan of this one. This one does 2 rows at once, and I have used it. This one is just like the primary 1 row. The belt feeder does actually go up and down. It articulates just like the previous one. This one is just 2 rows at once. Love this model. Makes it go very quickly. There's also this one, which I wasn't exactly certain what the purpose of was. I still have been experimenting to identify what that is, and I believe this one is just for moving them a much further distance because it does look like this is a conveyor belt that might actually be used for moving everything much farther along into a different bin. So I would assume that this one is just a single row that has a very long conveyor belt. Finally, we have this one, which is the self-propelled model, and it is 4 wide. I did actually measure. This is exactly as wide as the self-propelled potato and sugar beet harvester from the base game. So it is really nice to see that we have some uniformity, I guess is the best word to use. But I have driven this one. It is actually very nice to drive. This discharge belt does also articulate. It doesn't extend any further, but it can articulate. You can move the entire belt up and down, as well as you can move this up and down separately. Makes it a little bit easier to get into tall bins and tall trailers, that sort of thing. This does have a very, very wonderful turning circle, a whole lot better than any tractor pulling any of the others will ever have. So if you have a large, tight field, this is going to be your best bet. And then, of course, we spoke about the 3-point pallet mover as well as the attachment pallet forklift a little bit previously. And this one, I'm actually really excited to see this in the base game, or rather from a Giants official channel. This is something I've seen in mods before, where you just have a 3-point that you attach this to, and it just works exactly like a forklift. Having something like this really reduces the need of having a dedicated forklift, which if you're playing by yourself and you have lots of vehicles anyway, this can be an absolute godsend just to keep your sanity in check, I guess is the best way to put it, when you're looking through them and you're frustrated because you can't find your forklift or you can't find your skid steer. Just leave this in the, next to where you need to load pallets and just drive up with your tractor when you need it. It's wonderful. I love this idea. Last item, it looks like we have a new shovel. This is a front loader shovel. Thing I like about this one, it's very clearly made for vegetables because of that nice large flat bottom with the curve inward. So it kind of keeps with the theming, even if it doesn't do exactly what it should in the real world. Program code is program code. Just take advantage of what you can. Again, we've already spoken about the vegetable pallets. These, you can buy them in packs of 4. These are very wonderful for RP. I love the idea of using these for roleplay. When you're having to load up your vegetables into big boxes, put them up on your truck, take them to wherever, unload them from the truck, and reload the boxes back on the truck when you're done. Absolutely wonderful. Love it. Couldn't ask for anything better. Now, of course, you can just load the vegetables into just a giant bin, drive them down the road, drop them off at the soup plant, but what's the fun in that? Where's the farmer spirit and where's the hard work coming from if that's all you're doing? If you really want to play with friends, when you've got just 3 or 4 people on a server and you are all have one job that you need to do, this is the way to do it. Like if you have so many potatoes, so many carrots, everything needs to be moved, this is the way to do it. I love this idea. All right, and we're looking at the map here. This is actually a very nice map. It has a lot of very distributed resources, a lot of very distributed decoration. Everything feels like this could be a believable location. Somewhere out in Eastern Europe, possibly Russia, possibly even down into Azerbaijan. This is a very, very wonderful map for just believing the area that you're in. So we already started talking about the base farm that you start with on new game. If you start on medium, this is actually just a base plot. It's just a flat plot with nothing on it. So if we actually go in, we have a look. Everything here is sellable. Nothing here is guaranteed. It only comes in on new game, or I'm sorry, new player, beginner. If we look at the map again, we're saving, of course, we notice there's actually 2 other base farm plots to the north and south. And when I found that you purchase the field that comes with them, these farmhouses actually come with those plots. This right here already tells me this map was built with multiplayer in mind. You can actually have 3 farms with each their own farmhouse on the map, and that's actually a big, big deal. Previously, you couldn't have more than 1 farmhouse on a map, and I don't know if other maps have changed. I don't know if Elm Creek now has the ability to do that with Premium Edition releasing. I'll have to check, but because it has 3 farmhouses on the map, that's 3 farms that all have very interesting options around them. So when we're looking at this, on medium difficulty, the northern map and the southern map actually do still have their buildings. And if we go to either of these, we can actually see that the buildings are exactly the same as what comes with the center map. We can go into buy, and we can actually buy and sell any of these items, and they're the same items you see in the shop on the building options. You can, and if you notice, this is actually a different house than what was in the center. This is a little bit larger house with a nice big fenced-in yard, and if we try to sell it, we notice it's a little bit more expensive than the base house. We go into our houses. We're looking for premium. Here they are. You got an expensive house right here. You got a medium house. You got a really expensive house. That's a little bit more expensive than I thought it was going to be looking into it. Anyway, moving on. If you chose, you can absolutely purchase this plot, sell all the buildings on it, and the cost of the plot, which if you notice, is bit higher. Like this one's only 40,000, so 45, plot 45, which is the center farm. That's actually very, very inexpensive. So if you were to buy this in like medium or a multiplayer medium, you would not be out of any money at all. But this one down here at plot 90 with the southern farm, that's actually very expensive. You would have to sell some of those buildings to make that back up if you wanted to do that. Northern is even more so, 240,000 for that little tiny plot and field. But there's actually a reason, and I think the context of the area is really what sets these two apart. Uh, to get into that, I'm actually going to talk about the factories first. The factories on the map, the top one up here, carpentry, we also have a sawmill over here. Very importantly, the sawmill is right next to this massive area of trees. It is actually segmented, so unlike Elm Creek, you can buy these trees in parcel rather than all at once and spending literally the entire budget you started with. I hated that. There's more down here, there's more over here. All these trees are segmented. You don't have to spend a lot of money if you want to get into forestry on this map. And of course, you have the sawmill here, and you have the carpentry up here next to the 102. Excellent placement for those. I very much like the options they've given for forestry here. Then we have the preserved food factory. That's the one of the new ones. It actually looks very nice. Has a lot of more modern aesthetic to it. And of course, has lots of room for maneuvering trucks in, around, and through this area. Has a nice loading bay here. There's the front door. So of course, we have a great area for moving in trucks. And down here, we're going to skip over that one. That's just the animal dealer. We have a bakery here. This one is a little bit of a standout, and I'll get to why that is in just a moment. Down here, we have the new soup factory. Again, looks very nice. Has a little bit more of a modern appeal, but has the same Eastern European aesthetic to it. Again, has lots of area to maneuver trucks in and around. You have your front loading area here. You have the drop off here to the side. And of course, when you're pulling in like a large semi or a large truck, you can pull it through here, turn around, and you're right back out. There's no weird 3-point turns. There's no drop your trailer, pick it up here later. There's none of that. You can just pull in, turn around, pull back out, and you're in and out back to your farm. And of course, that is one of the new factories. And over here is the last new factory, and that's going to be the potato processing plant, and that's where you make your potato chips. Now, the problem you may have already noticed is that there's only one factory for food or grain or legumes, anything of that nature, and that is the bakery. And the problem with a bakery is you have to have a grain mill and a dairy and possibly even a sugar mill. Sugar mill I kind of give a passing grade to because even Elm Creek didn't have a sugar mill on its base map, and we haven't actually seen a Giants map with a sugar mill so far. So we're just going to kind of bypass the need for a sugar mill, but the need for a grain mill is what's necessitated for a bakery to operate. And on this map, there is actually a grain mill, but not in the way you would really think. And it's right here. And if you notice, that's a selling point. That's not a production point, that's a selling point. If we go to it, we can't buy it. It looks very nice. I really love this very industrial aesthetic. But this can't be bought. This can't produce anything. It's just a selling point. It's just a grain mill that's owned by an NPC on the property, presumably. But there's nothing. There's no buy point. There's no sell point. Oh, I'm sorry. There is a sell point, but there's no buy point. There's no drop off point. There's no pickup point. It's just a selling area. There's no production that can happen here. So if we wanted to make something for our bakery, we have to put up that factory ourselves. And it's actually the same with a couple of other circumstances on the map. And that is, so we have a spinnery over here. That spinnery can't make anything, it's just a sell point. We have a dairy down here, and that dairy can't make anything, it's just a sell point. We have a few other miscellaneous sell points, but they're pretty well established to be just sell points, so we'll just leave those alone. Um, have a biomass heating plant down here, but very importantly are the dairy, the spinnery, and the grain mill. And the reason I bring those up, if we go into the build menu and we kind of swivel around here and have a look, in our build menu, we can go to production, we can go to factories, and we can look for the premium edition, premium expansion. Here we go. And if we look through, there's a spinnery. That's a production, and it is actually the exact same model as the one on the map. There's our soup factory, there's a preserved food, there's the potato processing plant, there's the dairy, which again is the same exact model. In fact, I'll actually show you. I will go to the dairy, and I will show you this is actually the exact same model. There it is. It's twisted the right same way. It's exactly the same thing. It's just that this version can make stuff. It can actually produce what you were looking to produce out of a dairy. There's also the bakery, which is already on the map, and that's really it. But more or less, just the ones that are kind of weird are this dairy as well as this spinnery. In fact, just to make sure that I'm not crazy, we're going to go ahead and go to the spinnery. I'm going to zoom out, and if we look, that's very literally the exact same model. Being that they're the same model, it tells me that the model was probably created as a factory, but then stripped down of its features later, which is kind of odd, really. From a player perspective, I would really like to have these as base map options. If, say, for example, we have a multiplayer game and the northern farm is specializing in vegetables, I'll get into more into that later. To say the central farm is specializing in grain and the southern farm is specializing in cotton, why couldn't all three of those have a base map option to go to at least get started with that? Having a bakery on the map and no grain mill that you can use feels very much like an oversight. I'm not exactly sure how to feel about it specifically, but I will say it doesn't feel right. It feels, hmm, it doesn't feel right. I'm not sure exactly how to word it in an eloquent way, other than it doesn't feel right. I would very much have liked these to have been their production I'm sorry, the dairy grain mill, the production counterparts for these, and make better use of these absolutely gorgeous uh, lots that they've been put on. Like, a ton of work went into this. But really, all you're going to see now is just somebody bringing in a load of grain, dropping it off, leaving. They're not going to be interested in sticking around to have a look. They're not going to be interested in seeing um, what options there are for putting additional factories in here, or maybe like putting uh, a bakery over here, or maybe like a storage building over there. No, that's not really going to happen. This has really stifled what the player has access to for creative and playstyle options. And that doesn't feel conducive to player relationship with the game necessarily. I'm not going to say this is a developer problem, because the developers try to design the game to push you towards the new shiny. They created these factories and placed what factories on the map that there are, such as, the soup factory and, oh, I'm sorry, it's up here. Whoop. such as the preserved food factory and the soup factory down here, and the potato production. They place those there to push you towards the new items that have been added with Premium Edition, and those are excellent additions. They're scattered through the map. You don't feel like all three of them are in the same spot, and all three farms are having to go to the same place. If you're on a multiplayer, you don't feel like it's literally the same thing with multiple destinations. It really does make you feel like you're part of a farming community with the where they're placed, what you're making with them, how you're making it, the way that the prices fluctuate throughout the year, everything about the new crops was done correctly with this map. The problem I have with this map is that it doesn't expand on a lot from the base game. It really just attempts to be its own individual map with little or no connection to the original. It feels almost like a mod map that was just made by a team who created their own crops and wanted everyone to use their own crops because it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Again, I don't see this as necessarily a developer issue. I see this as more of a relationship issue between the player and the game because you have options to fix this yourself with a little bit of creativity. So if we go to, excuse me, if we go down to the southern farm and we actually hit X, there's a massive plot over here that's 87. It's only 200,000. And to really drive home what I mean by just a little bit of creativity, we're going to go down here, we're going to go into build, and we're going to look at 87. Look at that. That's lots of big, open, relatively flat land. We have a few trees here that you could get rid of and have lots of new flat land to use. But very importantly is this corner over here across from the dairy. And this is a huge plot of very flat land that has access to this road, and of course the main road out here. You could build an entire industrial complex. Like, just to show you how large this is, I actually went out and got a hold of the largest factory I could find on any mod, and that's this one. And it is absolutely dwarfed by this area. Like, you could build anything you wanted to in this area, and it's not that expensive of land. There's also a spot just over here, north of this particular field, in this area. That's not a great place because it has a little bit of a rolling hill going for it. But where it flattens off, if you flattened this off, you could build anything there you wanted to. You could respect the land, put something right on top of the hill, and really go into the detail. There's a lot of great options down here in the southern area. And just before I move on, I'm going to say that this southern farm area is my personal favorite. There is a huge, huge potential for what you can do in this southern farm. There's like the few fields here that have been pre-dug. You could build another field right here. You could build a field over here. You could build an industrial complex. You could even go into this northern part of 93 across this little marsh area. And there's another huge area here for fields, or possibly even like a industrial area over here across from the potato factory. Like, there's a lot of huge options here. There's a massive number of options here for anyone that really just wants to get their hands dirty, take some time and plop down a factory, some fencing, maybe a tree or two, make it look nice if you really want to. But there's a huge potential of options down here in this southern farm. And besides that, look at this view. Like, you just look around and everything feels so nice, so calm. You have like the hills in the distance, the wonderful placement of the trees. This feels like the most believable rural farm location I've ever seen on a Giants map, and I'm actually very serious about that. I love this farm to absolute death. This is probably going to be my go-to farm for playing on this map. Um, Now, that being said, if we go to the north, we actually have a few more options up here. Not as many. If you notice, there's a lot of field here, but more or less there's this massive hill, and there's this valley that comes down through here. Looks like there's a few options like right here that you could probably build something, and this actually does come with this the farm plot. So you could build like a factory over here, a small one, but you could still do it. But very importantly, is across from the farm plot, there's like these two areas across the either side of this creek. Both of these actually come with that plot on number 9. So even the northern farm up here has really good options for expanding and industrializing, but it's focused more on its fields, and we'll get to the fields in just a little bit once I get done with the center farm, or once we get through the center farm. We'll talk about the fields a little bit more because the fields on this map are also excellently designed, but we'll get into why. Now, if we go to the center area, this is this one is a little bit frustrating. Over here, there's this massive hill. You could probably build something here, but you'd have to take some time to really make it work well and look nice. Not a fan of this idea because there's this massive hill right here. There's not really much you can do here. There's the mod for the tiny little sheds that do production. That might work well here, but that's really all you're going to really come into. There's this plot that's right across that's just nothing but trees. Has a little bit of a hill in the center, but this is really your best option for production or building a factory, building a warehouse, building anything you need. This tiny little plot that's no bigger than your primary plot is really the only option you have. You can't sell these buildings. Can't sell these buildings. Can't even buy these plots for that matter. And when you go over here, try to go down the road a little bit, there's these weird hills and this marsh, and there's a couple of problems over here, like this massive hill. Like, this is a nice area. You could probably do something with that, but look how far that is from your primary farm. Like, you'd have to actually get in your car and drive, which I know that for RP, that's a great idea, but for throughput or someone who's playing this game as a business simulator like I am, that might not be truly ideal, but you do have an option right here. The only problem I have with this particular plot is how large it is, and the fact that it comes with a field. That might not be a problem if you're working with fields, um, particularly this one. That field is not worth using anyway, but that's not expensive. I will say that. Not expensive, but it is a little bit strange that it comes with a field. It's not this plot by itself. You kind of have to finagle around and do what you can to work with that field. But it's not a bad place to start at very, very least. Area over here is, if I'm not mistaken, that's also purchasable. Yeah, it's okay. So that's part of plot 53. There's areas over here, but as far as I know, these areas are very hilly. We'll actually go double check that right now. Oops. And yeah, that's kind of what I thought. Is there's a lot of trees here. That's relatively flat. You could do something with that, but it has that gentle slope that kind of goes up that way. That might be difficult to work with. There's a nice area here, which I did actually experiment a little bit in an alternate file with placing something that kind of butts up against this and has like a fence that comes out like this. This works. Like, this isn't hard to work with, but it's a little bit difficult because of that slope, so you have to be careful where the building is placed. That being said, very doable. Now, talking about the fields, getting back to those that I was speaking of earlier, if you've noticed something, a lot of the fields on this map, a lot of them, are very long and narrow. That actually is very conducive to potato and root crop farming. The reason is, if you think about it, taking one of these long, narrow fields, so like 50, or like any of these over here, when you have these long, narrow fields, as long as they're planted correctly, those vegetable rows will be running like this. And because of the way that they're harvested, the longer your run is, the less downtime you have, and the faster you can get that off the field. Um, if you don't want to think about it in the way of a business sense, it really just comes down to the efficiency of how quickly you can get the crops out of the ground into a bin, moving out. I know that still goes into business sense, and I'm sorry, but that's what it comes down to. Is when you have uh, those long runs that are long and narrow, that's fewer times that your tractor has to turn around. And the fewer times your tractor has to turn around, the more time it's spending digging up crop. So all of these fields that are massive, long and narrow fields, that's intentional. That wasn't just a weird design choice that somebody made somewhere. That's actually very intentional for the type of crop that they're wanting you very much to use on this field, on this map. I'm sorry. So everything kind of falls in together. These more square fields are much better for grain because the headers are wide and turning around isn't nearly as much of a problem for a self propelled item as it is for a tractor pulling a harvester behind it. So these square fields I would recommend for things like grains, legumes, and cottons, things like that. Especially like 55, as massive and wide as it is the largest field here, but it's not very good for vegetables. Same thing with these down here. These squarish fields are good for grains, whereas these long, narrow fields are very good for vegetables. So when you have these narrow, long fields, you can plant that up with carrots. You can get them over to your soup factory, and you can sell from your soup factory right on up to the farmer's market, what have you. And there's just a perfect gameplay loop where the field produces exactly the circumstances you need to plant vegetables. The factories ask for the vegetables that you need. The factories then can sell at very nice rates all year round. This entire map was built for root crops and to demonstrate what root crops can do for you on other maps. Now, that being the case, not every field, like we've said, is long and narrow. That means that when you're starting out, if you're not starting on this center field that has that nice long and narrow um, shape, you might have trouble getting into vegetables, especially 62. I tried that myself. Field 62 was not made for vegetables. There is a creek that runs right along through here that makes it extremely, extremely difficult for that tractor to get turned around. Just takes more and more time as you try to use it uh, to just make its little itty bitty runs back and forth. It's spending all this time trying to get turned around. It took significantly longer than it really should to get vegetables off this field than it did for me to get grains, for example. So, realistically, in conclusion, not to make this a review, but this is a very nice map for what it's trying to accomplish with root crops. The problems I have with it have more to do with what options it has for the factories and what options it should have for factories, but it doesn't. It means that you're really stifled for options in this map because they're pushing you towards the things that they added using this map. So, for what the map is intended for, excellent map. Highly recommend. Get your friends in here, make some farms, make some money, do the things you want to do with root crop. As soon as you leave root crops, I can't recommend this map as a high use, but it can be used if you don't mind putting in your factories where you think that you can get them. Central Field, I can't really help you. There's not a great option for putting a factory in here. I would recommend this one for vegetables. The Northern Field, I would definitely recommend for grains. Get yourself a grain mill, put it up over here, put it up over here, get it down to your bakery. You have a great gameplay loop right there. In the Southern Field, this is the field where the world really is your oyster. Your oyster, I'm sorry. You have options here, but these fields, especially the one that comes with the farm plot, these are not great for vegetables. You're going to have a little bit of a harder time with this field because everything has to be set up by you by hand. If you want to build on these fields, great job. I love it. Get going. but you're going to have to really get your hands dirty, know what you're going to do before you plant anything or buy any equipment. And everything you do on this particular farm is going to have to include assuming that you're going to purchase massive plots of land to do big things with. Because of that, it has a very North American play style down here. This area inside these highways is absolutely incredible. There's a blank page here, and it's just waiting for you to fill out the fucking words. Just put it in here, get your factories built, do everything. You can do anything literally with this area, but you have to do it. The game doesn't hold your hand for this area. Now, if the map had much better options, such as it had the dairy, it had the spinnery, it had the grain mill ready to go right there for you, it would be more than enough of a map to put at the top of every list for recommendation for multiplayer, for servers, for everything. But because of the way it's built, I have to say that Premium Edition brought root crops into the game, and they want root crops to stay on this map. And if we're talking about the forestry section of the game, as far as building for forestry, such as garages or home bases, I couldn't really find a great place to put a home base for forestry on this map. You can't buy the area around the sawmill or around the carpentry. 102 was as close as you can really get, and even that requires at least a little bit of work to try to get something moved in. Absolutely, you could use this area right here next to the road. It would have great access to this back road down here to go down into the forested area, all the way up to the edge of the map right here. That is actually wonderful. It makes 102 one of the most recommended places I can tell you to put something for forestry if you really wanted to. 102 is also a great area to put in new fields if you really wanted to, but with the carbony right here, it's not really a cool idea. If you have somebody on your map that's wanting to do forestry, I would leave 102 to them. That is definitely a better place to put in a garage or a home base for forestry machines. Coming off of that, the front part of 103 is not bad, as well as this area coming up against this road right here. 101 is a little bit too hilly. 99 is extremely hilly, but it has this waterfront area right here that makes it a little bit nicer to put things in, especially around the road and the areas here. 97 is another one that's just like 102. If you bought this, you could absolutely put a factory right here. I didn't talk about this one previously because really, this is honestly better used for a forestry garage if you really wanted to go there because it is extremely cheap. Whereas 102 is a little bit more expensive, still very cheap, but a little bit more expensive. 97 could swing either way. You could put a factory here. You could put garages along this and do your forestry equipment there. 987 is another good forestry area. You could do forestry here. You could do factories here. I would say factories are a better use of this space because it is such a massive single plot. But when it comes to 87, especially if the person who owns 90 owns 87, that's actually a wonderful opportunity because there are some trees here as well as here. If you do have someone on your map that does forestry, they could be contracted to come in and tear out these trees for you. That's a wonderful business opportunity for both of you. When it comes to 109, there's not a lot of great access for 109, and especially back here and close to the crusher area. 109 is very hilly. I don't really recommend it for trying to use as a home base. 108 especially has a hill ridge that goes right down the center here. If you could build around the watchtower, like right in here, that's all super flat space. That'd be wonderful, but apparently Giants isn't really interested in letting you do that. Can't get away that easy. 95 is extremely hilly. 107 is extremely hilly. 106 is extremely hilly. Like all of this has terrible places to put any kind of home base or anything like a lumber yard, anything like that. 107, in the northern area here, there's a plateau on top of this hill that could be used if you really wanted to put in the work to clear the trees, level the ground, that sort of thing. But it's really the only place I was able to find that made a lot of sense and didn't require some immense amount of work to get yourself a garage put up to put your equipment in. I do know that a lot of role players do like to make sure that when it's nighttime, they put their equipment up. When it's daytime, they get their equipment out, that sort of thing. I do the same thing. Um, for me, it's more a habit of organization more than it is role play, but it's the same idea. If you want to put your equipment somewhere, you've got to have somewhere to build that garage. And if I had to really say go here, 102 would be my go-to for a forestry area. It's right next to the carpentry. You could put your lumber yard, you could put your garages, you could put your maintenance facility. Everything could go in 102, and you wouldn't have any trouble at all fitting it all in. On the other side of the road in 104, same idea, and it's a bonus because you do get some trees in with those plots. You're not wasting that. You're not wasting field space from a farm or anything like that. For playing by yourself, and I guess it really doesn't matter, but that is what it is. 97 is another place you could do it, but like I said, because this could be used for a factory, and being that factory space is going to be at a little bit of a premium for some folks, especially if there's going to be a lot of players on your server, I would leave 97 for a factory. Like, absolutely. There are some trees off the back of here. Let someone else buy 97. You buy the trees from them. I wouldn't. I wouldn't dare go any other way about it. 102, however, if you're a farmer, leave this to a forestry specialist because 102 is just made for forestry. I wouldn't recommend being a farmer trying to build fields here because it's just too nice of a plot for a forestry specialist to use. Um, that being said, these are just recommendations. You can do whatever you want to. There's nothing here that should be taken as the word of God or by any means. I am not the best player, but I do have a pretty decent sense of where to put things, how to build things, and just passing on a little bit of a recommendation on how to use some of these plots. Well, folks, that's it. We've talked about everything that I can think of to talk about in this expansion. If you have any additional comments or you want to continue the conversation, put them in the comments below. I'll make sure to read all of them. And if you have comments suggesting other topics I can cover or things that you're concerned about or want to know more about, let me know. I have no problem talking about any of it. I'm great at rambling. Not sure I'm great at being intelligent, but we can get there if we need to. That being said, we will go ahead and wrap up here. Have a wonderful day. Cheers.